What is up, YouTube? Welcome back to the hashtag notagrom YouTube channel for what is probably the ultimate video that will ever be made on this channel, which is my 4-year owner's review of the 2017 to 2021 Kawasaki Z125 Pro. For those that have been following this channel since we had 100 subs or less, you know that this was my very first motorcycle and the motorcycle that inspired this channel because it's a Kawasaki. It's a Kawasaki Z125. It is not a Honda Grom. And unlike the previous two videos that I just released where I said that this was going to be a review video and a for sale listing because I'm selling my Honda Fit and my Kawasaki Ninja 400 at the moment, this video is different because this is not a for sale video because I would never sell my Kawasaki Z125 Pro. It is not only my first motorcycle, but it is also my favorite motorcycle and the best motorcycle that I've ever ridden, and we're going to get into why that is in this video, so that hopefully this video will top my first video on this subject, which was the Kawasaki Z125 Pro 1-year owner's review, and at the time of filming this, it currently has about 85,000 views. So hopefully we can topple that one with this one. And to start off the video, we're going to go into why I originally bought it. Now, I didn't buy this motorcycle with the same intentions I feel like most people buy a Z125 or a Honda Grom. I initially bought it primarily because I wanted something to film. I had started a couple of other YouTube channels in the past, but I didn't really have an interesting shtick, you know, something to go out and film and it be interesting enough to make a YouTube video about. On top of that, I've never been a motorcycle person. You know, my parents were those that were like, you're never owning a motorcycle so long as you live under our roof. And of course, because of that, I was scared of them for most of my adult life, but I always wanted one. I sort of always had this fantasy that one day I would just buy one, learn how to ride it, and everything would be good. And because of that long-term fantasy, I sort of always dreamed that I would have a Kawasaki. The reason being, when I was 12 years old, my dad bought this like 1984 Kawasaki Bayou 300. And keep in mind, I was born in 1984, so this was like a really old four-wheeler to me when I'm 12 years old. But despite that, and despite the fact that he bought it for like $600, it made it through like 5 deer seasons, hauled out roughly 25 deer, and then of course me and my friends would get on it and ride the crap out of it when my dad wasn't home, and I think we wrecked it 4 or 5 times and it would crank up and run every time after that. So of course, over the years, having this fantasy of owning a motorcycle, I was always just like, well, if I ever buy one, it's going to be a Kawasaki, because that one we had when I was 12 was amazing. So here we were in 2017, me needing something to film and always wanting this Kawasaki, and here comes my friend with a first-gen OG Honda Grom. And here was finally my opportunity to get that Kawasaki motorcycle, because Kawasaki was the only alternative to the Honda Grom in 2017. I don't even think there were any Chinese knockoffs yet at the time. If there were, there weren't very many, and they were probably the really, really crappy early ones that typically blew up within the first 1,000 miles. And of course, it was also attractive because here I was 33 years old, and I still never have lived out that fantasy of buying a motorcycle, but this was very appealing to me because it's very low to the ground. I kind of thought to myself, well, if I fall off that, I won't be falling very far. Not to mention, it's pretty slow and has a pretty small engine, so I won't be tempted to go way too fast, and if I do wipe out, it'll probably be at a relatively low speed, and I'll have a much higher survivability rate. So there were all those factors to consider. But the one thing that really hooked me, the one thing that got me, was the price, because you could buy one brand new for $3,000. More importantly than that, for someone like me at the time who had a decent job but didn't have $3,000 just laying around, you could also finance it, just like any other motorcycle. And that ended up being the deciding factor on why I ended up buying the Kawasaki Z125 Pro And speaking of pros, let's go into the pros, all of the things that I love about the Z125, starting with the price and the fact that it can be financed. The very first dealer that I spoke to that had one in stock, I really just went up there just to look at it. I wasn't intending on buying it, I just wanted to look at it, sit on it, and maybe figure out what the payments could possibly be. Well, just my luck, when I got there, of course I sat on it, I absolutely loved it, and I wanted it immediately. And of course the salesperson walks around the corner and says, well, do you have good credit? And I say, well, it's above 700. And they say, oh, well, you have good credit then, huh? So they sit me down, I do a credit application, and he comes back and he says, all right, so here's the deal. You are eligible for our best financing option, which is 0% down, $59 a month. And I was like, $59 a month? That's barely more than Netflix. I mean, obviously that's like 4 times more than Netflix, but you know, I'm justifying buying a motorcycle in my head at this moment. So to me, at the time, that is just slightly more than Netflix. And I'm like, yeah, I can afford that. And then, of course, 30 minutes later, we were loading the Z125 into the back of my pickup truck. However, I definitely would not regret this decision because this turned out to be one of the best decisions of my life. To continue down the list of the many pros, after the $60 a month, there's also the fact that insurance is ridiculously cheap. And of course, because it's only financed for $3,000, you don't have to have full coverage. So I went with liability plus theft, meaning if I wrecked the bike and it was my fault, they wouldn't pay for it. But if the bike got stolen or ran over by someone else, it would get paid for. And that insurance was only $150 a year. Now I believe I have full coverage on it, and I think it's still only $150 a year. It's just that I've been riding for so many years now that I get a better rate than I did back then. So now it's full coverage, but the same price. On to the next pro of the Z125 Pro. The next pro is that it gets excellent fuel mileage. It gets between 80 and 100 miles to the gallon. 80 to 100 miles to the gallon. That's better mileage than your mom's Prius. Which leads me to the next thing. Everyone loves it. If you are an attention whore, if you're like me and you love it when people just come up and start talking to you about random things all the time, then you're going to love a Z125 because everywhere you go, strangers are going to walk up to you and be like, hey, what kind of bike is that? How many cc's is that? How much does it cost? Where can I get one? Like, these are going to be questions that you get asked all the time. And I know that may sound like a little annoying, and sometimes it is. But the cool thing is you'll meet a lot of interesting, cool people, and possibly even somebody that might come ride with you later on because they saw your bike and went and bought one for themselves. So it's kind of a, you know, self-marketing motorcycle. And of course, another pro is that it is reliable. If you know anything about the Honda Grom, they are super reliable. I would say that the Kawasaki Z125 Pro is just as reliable, if not more reliable. I have seen them with stock blocks with like 50,000 miles on them. Another thing I like about the Z125 Pro is it is basically a dual sport, but it's kind of like a 70-30 dual sport, right? Kind of like those 70-30 dual sport tires. They're 70% designed for on the street and 30% designed for off-road, and that's kind of what the Z125 Pro is like, because it is primarily tuned, its suspension and everything is tuned for the street, and it comes with street tires on it. But you can put off-road tires on it. You can put dual sport tires on it like I have on mine, or you can put full-on knobbies on it if you want to, you know, if you're going to be primarily off-road. And while the suspension is a little stiff and it is set up a little bit more like a street bike and it's not going to handle like a dirt bike off-road, again, it's basically a dual sport. You can do both. And lastly, out of all the pros, the most important thing of all is it is more fun to go fast on a slow bike than it is to go slow on a fast bike. If you go out and buy a Ninja ZX6R, a 636, you know, those bikes are capable of a top speed of 163 miles an hour and can outrun most sports cars. Best of all, you can buy one brand new for under $10,000. However, there is one problem with super sports that money cannot fix, and that is that you can almost never use the full potential of that motorcycle. Pretty much 95% of the time that you're on that motorcycle, you're only going to be using 10 to 15% of its potential power. And that gets really boring really fast. Whereas on a Z125, in order just to go to the post office, in order just to go to the gas station, in order to just go pick up a pack of smokes, you are going to be wide open throttle, beating it down, getting down and dirty, making her scream like a porno, because it's more fun to go fast on a slow bike than it is to go slow on a fast bike. Alright, and that's pretty much all the pro points. Now we move on to the cons, the things that I don't like about the Z125, and there's really not a lot. There's still not a lot. Even after 4 years, I'm pretty much stuck on basically the exact same issues that I had back when I did the 1-year review video. The main one being the clunky 4-speed transmission. I've talked about this a lot, especially when it's oil change time, your oil's a little worn down, you're going to have a lot of problems accidentally going into neutral, like you're going from first to second gear and it'll go to neutral instead, or you'll be trying to go from second to first and it'll go into neutral. This is just something that's normal and that you just learn to deal with over time. So far as I know, the Grom is not really that much different, and eventually you'll get used to it and you'll just kind of adapt your foot and it'll become subconscious and you won't think about it anymore. But if you switch bikes, if you ride a different bike for a while and then go back, you'll have the same problems all over again. It's just kind of a learning curve thing. Personally, I think they should have put a 5-speed in it from the factory. I know you can buy an aftermarket 5-speed kit and convert it into a 5-speed, but I think it should have came with a 5-speed from the factory. What it really feels like it needs is it needs a gear in between third and fourth. When you're getting to the top of third gear, you still feel like you've got a little bit of oomph there. And then when you shift to fourth, it's like it drags it down way too much. If you could start out in fourth at a little bit higher RPM, then you could probably easily maintain 65 miles an hour pretty much everywhere you went. If we ever get a second generation Z125, I was hoping we would get one this year. Obviously we did not. But if we ever get a next generation, that is something I hope they do, is that they put a 5-speed transmission in it. Second thing I hate about the Z125. When I first got it, I didn't think this was a big deal. I thought it was pretty simple, pretty straightforward, and it is. But now that I've had a few other motorcycles and done it several times, I've decided that the oil change system really sucks. I really wish that it either had A, just a screw-on filter, kind of like on the Ninja 400, or B, just had a simple cap system like on the KLX 250. On the Z125, you got to take this little thing off the front, and it's got this little O-ring in there, and you might be able to reuse the O-ring, or you might not. In most cases, it's better just to replace it every time, but that's one more thing that you got to pay for to replace. And on top of that, you got this little filter that you sort of have to just shove in there, and then you got this little spring, and so you gotta like put this little spring thing on top of the filter, and then you have to line up your O-ring and make sure your O-ring doesn't pop out, and then you have to squeeze it all together and then try to like hand fit these two 8mm bolts that are kind of tight, and it's just a hassle. It's just a hassle. It's not hard to do, it's just a hassle, and I feel like it could have been a lot simpler. But out of all the mechanical things, that's really the only two things that I had any actual issues with. It's the only two things that I really didn't like about the bike. But again, neither one of those things are deal breakers. They're just minor inconveniences. The only other real con about the bike is it's not a supermoto. I feel like if it had a little bit longer suspension travel that was a little bit softer and came with a supermoto style front fender instead of the sport bike style front fender, I think this would not only be a better handling, more useful motorcycle, but I also think it would be a better selling motorcycle, because essentially you'd be getting, you know, the 125cc air-cooled engine just like the Honda Grom, but you would have a little more suspension travel, and it would still be perfectly capable because it would be a dual sport. It's just it would be a 50-50 instead of a 70-30. But then again, I also prefer off-road bikes, so for most people that may not apply. Again, just my opinion that it would be better if it was a little more supermoto oriented. The last thing I don't like about the bike actually has nothing to do with the bike and really more to do with the perception of the bike. This is not even really a check against the bike, but really just the user base, the people that ride them and what people typically recommend them for. And so this all boils down to, I do not believe that this is the best beginner bike. Gasp. I know, right? And I know that I said in my 1-year video that it's an excellent beginner bike, but after, you know, a few years of riding under my belt and really putting some time and thought into it, I just don't think it is. I don't think it's a great beginner bike. And the reason I'm going to tell you is probably not going to make a hell of a lot of sense, but it's because it's too slow. Now, if you live in a place where traffic is really slow, you know, the average speed limit is like 45, 55 miles an hour. You got plenty of pavement. Maybe you live in a sleepy little town where there isn't a whole lot of traffic anyway. If you live in a place like that, then yeah, it's an excellent beginner bike. It'll be perfectly fine. You'll love it. But if you live in a busy city or somewhere where the traffic, you know, the speed limits are closer to 65, 75, and you live somewhere where there's a lot of traffic and very little road, this is going to be a horrible, horrible beginner bike, and you're probably going to be terrified most of the time and not even really able to fully enjoy it, because this bike is very small, it's very hard to see, it's very hard for other cars to see. It also has very slow acceleration, especially if you're already in the top of its power band. You know, if you get in a sticky situation that you need to get out of, and the best way to get out of it is just to hit the gas and zip away, well, if you're already going 55 miles an hour, you aren't zipping away from anything on a Z125 or a Honda Grom, either one. So whatever situation you're in, you're just going to be sitting there crossing your fingers hoping that nothing goes wrong. Another situation is red lights. You might roll up on a red light, it turns yellow, you know that you don't have time to stop, but you also know that you're not going to make it to the other side before it turns red. And if a car pulls out in front of you right when their light turns green, there's a very good chance you're going to hit them. So as a beginner, somebody that really doesn't know how to negotiate that situation, that can turn into a very bad situation very fast, primarily because the brakes are very small, so the bike doesn't stop very fast, and the engine is very underpowered, so you can't just rip on the throttle and speed through there. This is a situation where experience comes into play, and as a beginner, you won't have the experience to make the right decision in that situation. So that's why I say it's not the best beginner bike. Again, depends on your situation. If you live in a small, sleepy town and there's not very much traffic, or you've got a place where you can ride it a whole bunch, where there isn't a whole lot of traffic, maybe you live in a big city, but you live in the outskirts and, you know, in your neighborhood and stuff, you can ride it around, that might be okay. But just consider those factors before you consider this as a beginner bike. If you really want a beginner bike, a really excellent beginner bike, no matter where you live, I would recommend the Kawasaki Ninja 400 or Kawasaki Z400. So if you are a beginner, you're looking for the best beginner bike, and especially if you're going to be riding on the street, I would go look at those two bikes. If you're in the opposite situation, you live out in the country where there's a lot of dirt roads and stuff, I would go check out the brand new 2021 KLX 300 and possibly even the KLX 300 Supermoto. All right, that's pretty much it. That's all my pros and cons, all the things I love about the bike, all the things that I hate about the bike. Now I want to talk about some of my favorite mods, things that I've done to mine, and a few things I plan on doing in the future. So starting out, I got the original green, the original Z125 non-KRT green. I originally thought I was going to want the black and gray, and then I got to a dealership where they had both, and I just had to have the green. And of course I have the Pro Taper pillow tops. They're probably the most common grips for this particular bike and pretty much all mini bikes. They are super comfortable. You know, this is a single cylinder air-cooled engine, so it vibrates a lot, and the stock grips, you know, like your fingers and stuff will go numb. So that's why that's why I always get the Pro Taper pillow tops. They make it so your hands don't go numb. They're very comfortable for a high vibrating engine like that one. And best of all, they're like $15 and they'll typically last a whole season. All of these parts that I'm listing will be down in the description below. You can click on an Amazon link and go buy these for your Z125 if you just bought one or plan on buying one. Next favorite mod is the Pro Taper Contour Raptor Bend. Now this is a bend designed for the Raptor ATV. It's actually a little bit too big for the Z125, but again, I'm 6'3", 220 pounds, so I wanted like you know, kind of some tall handlebars, you know, and that was the best way to achieve that with this particular bike. And because I got fancy bars and fancy grips, gotta have the best levers on the market. Even though I don't stunt this bike, I just really like these levers. They're super comfortable. Every time you reach up and grab one, you know that you're grabbing a quality lever. And I'm kind of a lever snob. I don't like the cheap Chinese levers at all. I wouldn't put them on my bike. You couldn't give them to me for free. But I don't hate on anyone that gets them. I just prefer my $300 ASV F3s. Not your bike, it's my bike. My next favorite mod is my contoured Thailand seat. While it looks a little odd, and a lot of people say it doesn't look like it would be very comfortable, it is way more comfortable than the stock seat. The stock seat is like sitting on a board, and I think I picked this seat up for like 65 bucks. So excellent inexpensive mod. If you only do one mod, this is the mod you should do. And then last on the list of my favorite mods is my Kenda K761 70/30 dual sport tires. 70% for the street, 30% off-road. I have already tested them on a long dirt road. They held up great. They're able to go places that the street tires the bike came with definitely could not go before. And again, I do wish it was a supermoto, so of course I would go with something a little more supermoto oriented in my choice of tires. But that also leads to the future mod list, where I plan on finding and installing the best suitable supermoto front fender, because these K761s, the front tire rubs that stock fender pretty bad. So we're just going to yank that thing off of there and find us a proper supermoto fender and figure out a way to attach it to the bottom of the stock headlight. And I will be making a video on that in the future, along with all of the other things on this list, like TST front blinkers. I've already got those in. Just got to make a video of installing them. TST integrated taillight, I don't have that yet. I do plan on getting it. I will make a video. TST fender eliminator, same situation, don't have it yet. Once I get it, I will make a video. Bride Thailand seat. Well, it's identical to the other seat that I just talked about. It's not any different, it just looks different. It just says Bride on it. More than likely, if you've seen a Z125 or a Grom with an aftermarket seat, you've seen the Bride seat. You know, it just looks better. I wished I'd have bought it to start with. Up from that, I would like to get some rear sets, but I don't really want to get cheap ones. Maybe I'll get some driven rear sets or some Woodcraft, something really nice. I mean, I've already spent $300 on levers. I might as well spend $300 on rear sets too, right? And last but not least is the exhaust. Now, I have the Empire exhaust on here now, which is a pretty high quality exhaust, but I've had it for a while. I'm not even certain if they make it anymore. I don't think it sold very well, but the paint job is definitely getting very faded. It's already been cracked and re-welded, and I'm just tired of it. I'm ready for something different. The only reason I have it in the first place is because the company that makes them reached out to me early on and offered to send me one for free if I made an install video, which I did, which you can still go watch. But it's been on the bike for a couple of years now, and again, I'm ready for something different, and I am going to go with the Zoom Loop, probably the most popular exhaust for the Z125. It's also one of the lesser expensive ones. I think they're about 240 bucks brand new. Of course, they come out of Thailand just like the seats do. But that pretty much wraps up my future mod list. I hope you really enjoyed this 2017 Kawasaki Z125 Pro 4-year owner's review. If you're considering buying one for yourself, I highly recommend it. And hopefully 4 years from now, you'll be making your own Kawasaki Z125 Pro 4-year owner's review. If you're interested in more Kawasaki Z125 Pro content, be sure to hit that subscribe button. And of course, all of those future mods that I just listed, I'll be making videos on over the next season, along with more KLX 250 videos, and maybe if I can pinch enough pennies, just maybe, towards the end of summer, we're hoping, we're aiming, we're shooting for it, KLX 300 Supermoto. But that's it for today's video. If you like this video, hit that like button. If you want to see more videos like this, hit that subscribe button, and we will see you next time. Peace.